Hello and welcome to today's Mozi Pro webcast webinar on selecting files for backup with Mozi Pro. My name is Craig Cole. I'm the Senior Technical Education Specialist here at Mozi. My job is to train both our internal tech support individuals as well as helping our partners and some of our customers understand how the product works. Our goal today will be to introduce you to some of the most common components of Mozi Pro, and one of the singular most important functions of Mozi Pro, selecting files for backup and making sure that your data is protected. We're going to start with a simple presentation. It's very simple, very basic outline of how this service works, how Mozi Pro works, and how to back data up, selecting files for backup, and then we're going to spend a little bit of time doing a demonstration of that particular process. We're going to cover mostly basic things, but it is one of the most common things that people call us asking about. So let's go ahead and start the presentation, but there will be time for questions and an answer Q&A period at the end of this broadcast for you to interact with me. You just type in questions or chat in the chat or questions section of your software, and I will answer those as best I can, keeping in mind I may get more questions than I actually have time to cover. All right, so let's look just quickly here. Mozi Pro is designed for our business users. We do have a consumer level product. However, the difference between the two is pretty minimal. So if you're familiar with one or the other, you should be comfortable with either product. Our goal here at Mozi is to keep your data safe for you and to provide that in a feasible and economic way. One of the problems we run into is people call us after they've had some sort of problem with their computer or they've lost their data, and it turns out that they haven't selected the files that they really needed to keep. It's actually quite sad. Sometimes we get people who've lost their wedding photos or their pictures of their babies because they didn't bother to select the right file. So today's focus will be on this most important function that you as a Mozi Pro customer must do in order to ensure that your data is backed up. So just behind installing the software is configuring it properly to back up those files that are important to you. So we have two primary facets for selecting files for backup. I'm going to talk about the more complex one first, and then we're going to talk about the one that's used the most often. We're going to talk first about what are called backup sets. A backup set is a collection of files based on the type of the file or the location of the file and certain other parameters that we use logic in order to, computer logic, to select those files. As an example, we could say all MP3 and other types of music files would be included in a backup set to be backed up. Or we could say all of our Word documents and our text documents would fit into a backup set. No matter where they're located, we would say from this folder down, anything that matches that type would be backed up. So Mozi has gone ahead, and to help our customers, we've created some backup sets that are predefined. They do things to back up everything from music files to pictures to Word documents to email client like PST files for Outlook to just Word documents to tax documents, PDFs, and those kinds of things. And these are all things that we have created in the client software itself. And when you install it, we detect which of those things you might have installed as well, and we include the backup set for you to select or to use. There is part of the catch here. When you install the software, when the backup sets tab is opened in the client software, you only see those files, or excuse me, those backup sets that apply to your machine. As an example, if you don't have Microsoft's Office or Outlook installed, we won't offer the backup set that backs up Microsoft Office or Outlook 2012 or whatever, or 2010, whatever version of Outlook you have. We won't offer that to you because there's no reason, because selecting it wouldn't back anything up. This should be fairly logically consistent if you think about it. So you can turn it on so you can see what types of backup sets are available to you, even if you don't have the software, just by going into the Options tab, the Advanced section, and looking at the options there. One of them is to display all backup sets instead of just one of the few that we see. I'm going to demonstrate this in just a minute. We can also create a custom backup set. This allows us some flexibility because we can say, if we find that a specific type of file is not well represented by Mozi's default backup sets, we can create our own backup set to allow us to back that content up. So how do we do that? Well, you go to the Backup Sets tab inside of the Mozi Pro software. You right-click in the left-hand pane of the Backup Set window and select Add Backup Set. You specify the name for the backup set. So there are really three things. A name for the backup set. In the right pane, you have to select a location. That's the second item, a location for where the files are stored. And then a rule has to be added. A rule just says what types of files in this location do you want to back up. If you were not using backup sets, you would back up either the individual file or the entire folder. This way, with the backup set, gives you flexibility so that you can select just the files and file types that you are interested in, which gives you a considerable increase in control of what files are backed up, especially if you're trying to stay below a certain amount of storage that you have purchased. Now, what types of rules? That third item is kind of the sticking point. There are different types of rules that you put inside of a backup set, and this is the list of them. There's file type, size, last modified, created, file name, and folder name. You'll notice also the include statement to the left. That's a drop down that you can put exclude. You would never create a backup set that was entirely made of exclude rules. You have to put things in the backup set before you can exclude them. So you can have exclude on there, but you need to include something in the backup set first. So you might say include all file types of PDF as is displayed on the screen. And then you might say exclude any files that are size greater than 10 meg. That way you could prevent those additionally large files from being backed up if that was your intent. Again, there's a great deal of flexibility here. However, it requires a bit of deeper understanding, or at least taking some time to contemplate the meaning of selecting a file or changing a rule to select a file, and therefore sometimes too complex for some of our users. That's why this is not the primary method that most users select files. They generally use the File System tab. Now we're going to go to the File System tab in just a minute, but there's one more item on this Backup Set tab, or backup sets, that I wanted to focus on, and that is the creation of what are called excluded rules. An excluded rule, similar to what I was showing you with that little drop down, is an advanced option that you can enable in the Advanced Options section of your Mozi Pro software. By enabling the advanced options for backup sets, it makes it so that you can create a rule that goes and finds a certain type of file or whatever parameters you want for that file, and then saying, I don't want this type of file to be backed up, to exclude them from ever being backed up. Now, the way this works on Windows is that if you select a file for backup, no matter what you do elsewhere to select that file, it will never be backed up because of this excluded rule. Because of the way the logic works in the client, it creates a list of files to be backed up, and then it crosses off the ones that will not be backed up because of the exclude rule. Now, exclude rules have a bit of advanced logic in them, or at least something that requires you to think for a minute before you implement an exclude rule. I'm going to give an analogy first, and any of you who've attended this particular webcast before, I apologize for reusing it, but I think it's a very apt analogy. The first thing is, let's say that I'm cleaning out my garage, and I get two boxes. In the two boxes, I have one that says keep and one that says don't keep. In order for me to keep the files I want, or the things that I want for my garage, I pick them up and I put them in the keep box. I'm going to keep those. Now, in order for me to throw away the ones that I put in the don't keep box, I have to include them in the box first before I can throw them away. The same thing applies with files. In order for a file to be excluded from backup, if I'm excluding an entire set of files, I have to put them in the box first before I can throw them away. I have to create a rule set that includes the files. Now, I've gone back one slide, and the reason for that is this include column on the left-hand side. I have to include files into that bucket first, and then at the top of the list, there's an option to exclude the entire box from being backed up. This gets people. What usually happens is people come in here and they select exclude in this drop down and the exclude check mark up at the top, which does the opposite of what you're intending. It makes sure that that file is not handled one way or the other on either side. So keep that in mind as you are working with backup sets. I'm going to actually demonstrate this in just a minute. We'll come to backup sets and take a look at how that works. Now, the most common way that people select files for backup is using the File System tab inside of the Mozy client. This is the simplest way to add files into a backup. You simply open the Mozi Pro software, you go to the Mozi Pro tab, or the File System tab, and you select the file with check marks on the right-hand side, the files you want backed up. If you want an entire folder backed up, you just check next to that folder, and the entire file will be included in the next backup. There's no logic, there's no additional, well, do I have this, do I want this type of file or that type of file? Anything that's in that folder is backed up, or any file that is directly called out to be backed up is backed up. There's a problem with that too. With that simplicity, you lose some of the simplicity, the ease of use that comes by using, let me back up, by using this File System tab, you lose some of the complexity and some of the flexibility that it has in selecting files and including them for backup based on complex rules. So, can be a pro or a con. Now, there are other ways to add files, but the reality is it's selecting files for backup based on the File System tab. One of them is to add files through the Windows Explorer method. So Windows Explorer is the application you use to look at your files on your computer. When you're browsing down to look at your pictures or whatever, you go to your home directory and you look at the files there. You're using Windows Explorer on a Windows box. On a Windows box, you can go to a file or folder and right-click on that folder in the Windows Explorer, and you get a menu like is displayed here where Add to Mozi Pro Backups is one of the options. So you can simply add a file to be backed up during that install, or during that next backup. So there you go. There's an additional way to do it, to select files. If you have a server license, you also have the ability to add a network share to be backed up as well. You simply go to the File System tab, right-click on the left-hand pane, and click Add Network Share, then put in the credentials as prompted to back that up. Now, if you must have a Mozi Pro server license in order for this to work. However, you can, again, back up machines in a remote location or that you have access from the machine that you have the Mozi Pro server software installed, if you so choose. All right, so let's do a demonstration. We're going to look at backup sets in the File System tab, just to give you an idea of how this whole thing works. Let's see, just a second. We do have some questions here, just a second. We'll get to those in just a minute. Hang on with your questions. We will get to those in a minute. All right, so let's do just a quick demonstration of working with Mozi Pro. Now I'm going to go ahead and just pop that up. Okay. All right, so here you go. Let's move these off the screen. Okay. So inside of Mozi Pro, this should be a common interface for you all. Let's look at this. Under backup sets, the backup sets is the more complex of the two. And let's look at that real quick. Notice that the only items that are selected, there aren't really anything very much selected here because this is a fairly recent install for me. But you'll notice that I happen to have an email and contacts, and then in parentheses it has Thunderbird. Thunderbird is an email client or application that you can use for reading email. I have it installed on this machine, and so one of the options is, if I wanted to, I could select that and it would back up all of the files or all of the things associated with Thunderbird that would make it so that if there were a crash, I could restore that data and have my email back. There are other things that are available. I happen to have Mozilla Firefox installed. You'll notice that Firefox also shows up. So again, applications show up in this list if they have been installed on the machine and they are supported by Mozy to be backed up directly. Now, that doesn't mean that applications that don't show up on the list can't be backed up. It just means we haven't created a rule set specifically for them. We don't have any special rules for them is basically what that comes down to. There are a couple of other things that may be of interest that go in this, and that is the addition of these VSS items or labels next to these. VSS stands for Volume Shadow Copy Service. It's a Microsoft component of Windows that makes it so open files can be backed up. I'm not going to go into great detail here. However, what it allows us to do is to back up things that have to run all the time, such as you can use it for a Microsoft Exchange server and back up a Microsoft Exchange server in its entirety. That includes all of the components that need to be backed up and can be restored to bring the system back to an original state. VSS can be very handy. Again, it's a Microsoft product, but it's also good to know that that option is there. Now, let's just go through. If I right-click and add a backup set, remember there are three things I have to do. Number one, I have to give it a name. So test backup set will be my name. Okay. Then I need to give it a location where it's in effect. Let's say it's all of my home directory. And then I have to add rules. So I have to have at least one rule. So I'm going to include all files of type PDF. Now, what is file type? Microsoft Windows calls file type, it's defined by the extension of the file. If you don't know what the extension is, don't worry. If you do know, then that's how it gets that definition of what file type is. If you need more than one type of file, let's say PDFs and docs, Word documents, you just put a space and the extension, and that will include that type in that rule. If I want to, I can add additional rules by clicking the plus sign to the right here, and I can add additional items as I need to. I can say anything to include anything, let's say exclude anything that is less than 4K, because anything less than 4K isn't really going to work for us. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I've got this new backup set. Just a moment, it's going to show up in my list here. Oh, I forgot, it's in the midst of scanning my files there. All right, so there you go. There's my test backup set. Right there in the bottom left, it says test backup set. You'll notice that's in there. Now, I'm going to create that as an excluded backup set. Let's say, for instance, I didn't want it to back up PDFs and documents. I can come in here under Options and under Advanced, and there's an option for Show Advanced Backup Set Features. I've gone ahead and selected that. Okay, so now I should have, if I look back in that Backup Set section, I should have, under Backup Set, you'll notice right at the top, you notice this thing that's been added to it. Files matching this set will be excluded from the final backup process. If I click that, now, when I save that, it makes it so that any files that match that backup set will not be backed up. So I've just changed the logic from yes, back it up, to no, don't back it up. Now, why do I bring this up? As a Mozi Pro user, you're probably aware that things show up on your Mozi Pro computers, on the computers, that don't necessarily belong there, especially if you have different employees working with those. You can see, as an example, people's movies sometimes show up on your machines. This would be a way to prevent someone from backing up a copy of the Twilight series of movies if you wanted to. Not that I would ever poke fun at the Twilight series. Simply pointing out that you could exclude people from backing up large quantities of data if you wanted to by type. You could do movies, you could do music, you could do any type of file that you want to prevent. Now, I'm going to go ahead and remove this, but you've now seen the process for adding that, and that can be of value to kind of prevent things from getting over the limit or over your quota. The next section, the next item is the File System tab. Now, the File System tab is very straightforward. You either are selecting files for backup, or you're not. I'm going to simply browse down underneath my directories here, and I'm just going to look at, let's see, let's just look on the desktop. There's an Applications folder, and you look on it, and it has a bunch of different links here. If you'll note, you'll see that under My Documents, under Desktop, well, let's look at My Documents for a moment. Let's just go back and look. If you look at My Documents, you'll notice there's this check mark, but there's kind of a gray background behind it. What that means is that anything, that some of the files in that directory are flagged for backup, but not all of them. So if you see that, then you know that something in there is being backed up, but not everything. If I come back here and I select it again, it includes, it's now completely white in the background, and there's a check mark on the folder icon itself. That means any new items added to that folder will be backed up as well. All right. File system is the easiest way to add files. Now, I happen to have a server version or a server license key installed on this machine, so I can add a network share. If I wanted to, I could put in the path to a server using what's called UNC pathing and put server path whatever, and then put in the username and password of the person or the account to connect as, click OK, and then it would allow you to access that path and include it for backups as well. All right. Well, let's see. There is one other section I did want to cover today before we continue on. I wanted to look at using Mozi's Support portal. Let me just pull up a browser here, and then we'll go to the question and answer section, and we'll go for 5 or 10 minutes just answering questions to make sure that you're clear on things. Now, I want to point out that Mozi's Support portal is designed around helping you find questions, finding answers to questions, not finding questions. If you want to find a question, ask a 4-year-old. So let's do this. So support.mozy.com is a portal that is designed around 2 primary objectives. Number 1, answering questions for customers about their product, and number 2, allowing you to interact with the Mozi support personnel through a web interface. So if you don't have time for a phone call, but you can send a quick question or you need something from support, you can come here and do that through this interface. Now, I'm first just going to point out a couple of the basic layout of this page. There is a search bar up at the top. This search bar includes searching of our knowledge base. So no matter where you are on Mozy.com, if you do a search, you'll be searching not only the regular website, but our support portal as well, looking for answers. So you can type in, how do I purchase more quota or more storage? And those things will allow you to search our entire knowledge base and find answers there. Now, let's look. There's a support home, there's a community section, a knowledge base, which is full of articles on how to fix either specific problems or to answer the most commonly asked questions or frequently asked questions, as they're called. There's a documentation section, and there's a video tutorial section that walks you through in short 5-minute or less videos how to perform certain functions within Mozi Pro. You might be very interested, if you're attending this webinar, to go and poke around there. A lot of the questions you have are answered in basic form there. All right, so if we have questions, the first place, the best place to look is inside of the knowledge base. You might, or the search term. So you may search for something like, how do I select files for backup? Okay, you'll notice there's quite a few different things in here, including things from our regular home page, but then it also starts talking about some of our different things like tutorials, how to use different backups, backup techniques, and on the left-hand side, we can narrow that search down to the specific areas we're looking for. As an example, I want to look at the solutions. So when I select that, now it narrows down the results displayed in this front page to whatever it is. So we'll look here, we're looking, how do I add files using Windows Explorer? Excellent, I'm selecting files for backup. I can come in here, and this explains how to do that particular task. Now that's a pretty simple question, a pretty simple answer, but this is a great start for finding answers to your questions. There's also a community website that walks through, or that gives you answers that are provided in a lot of times by our own community members, not Mozy employees. But we do have a paid staff who spends time every day monitoring these forums and answering questions for people as they have trouble. So this is a good place to come for information. Notice you can also find things like our, they're built up for different sections. You can also look, there is a beta program. There are also recent posts. You can track a lot of the information that's going on in the community from inside that page. So that's a good place to start as well. There's also the documentation. The documentation is a straightforward user's manual for your Mozi Pro software. Don't be afraid to go look at it. It's actually written very well, and should be able to guide you in most of the questions you may have about the Mozi Pro software. All right. Well, let's go ahead and go to the question and answer section. Again, you can type inside of the chat section or inside the question section, and in both cases, I'll be watching that to get a little bit better, hopefully give you some answers specific to what you're looking for. So let me look at a couple of the questions, and then we'll go ahead and address those. All right. Okay, Randy asks a fairly detailed question, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know the answer for that. However, Randy, if you will send me just a private chat, I will go and find the answer and send you a response later today. So just go down there under chat and send me a private email with, or a message with just your email address with the account information on it, and I would just your email address is sufficient, and and I will go get that answer and get it back to you. Again, I apologize for not being able to answer that one off the top of my head. I just don't know that one for sure. Okay, Sydney's asked a question: how can I find and delete duplicate files in the backup data? Sydney, I did see your email earlier. I just didn't have time to get to it. Earlier today, Sydney sent me an email asking how to find and delete duplicate files on the backup in the backup data. The easiest way that I was able to come up with, I talked with a couple of the people out on the floor to make sure I was thinking properly here. Really, the only way to do it is to go into your restore section and look for any file that you think might be duplicated. And if you do find it, you can actually do a search for the name of the file, and if it shows up more than twice or more than once, then you would go out to the second location and see if you have an entire folder or if it's just that one file that's been duplicated. There is not an easy way to do that. That would be an interesting product enhancement. I'd like to see that myself. Okay, so Laura's asking a question. How do you set up a network connection again? You may not have the option to add a network connection if you don't have a Mozi Pro server license installed on the machine that you're working with. If you are using a Mozi Pro desktop license, you won't be given that option. But let me walk through it again just to make sure that we have covered it. If you come over to the File System tab and you right-click on the left-hand pane under File System, there's Add Network Share. Again, you won't get this option if you're using a desktop version or desktop license of the Mozi Pro software. But if you do, you should be able to get into that without any problem. All right. Right. Well, we're a little bit thin on questions for today. Looks like that's the end of my list. I'm going to give you another minute or two to add any additional questions you may have. I'll be glad to open them up and address them. Next week we do have, or next month we do have another Mozi Pro web seminar coming up. We're still not sure on the topic. There's a possibility we'll be covering the new Mozi Stash the new Mozi Stash product, which will be coming out in the fairly near future. That's in beta right now, but I don't know if that's going to be ready. If not, we'll probably move into a description for managing resources and handling license keys and so forth, and that would probably be it. Look for the invite to go out to our Mozi Pro customers, probably within a week or two of the webcast itself. You can also check on our Twitter and Facebook pages. We do post the invitations there for anyone who wants to join if you don't see an invitation. The Twitter and Facebook invites don't usually go up until about 2 or 3 business days before the launch or the beginning of the webcast. Okay. All right, we do have we did have a couple of additional questions. Karen asked, can I view my files that are backed up at Mozi to make sure everything is there? Yes, you can. The easiest way to make sure that your data is safely backed up is to come into the Mozi Pro software and click on the Restore tab. I'm going to do that now. In the Restore tab, you simply browse down to the location where you think files should be backed up. You highlight that section, and then under there, you should see whatever files have been backed up. Now, in my case, I only have files from my documents directory backed up. So I didn't see anything under just regular users, but I went under my documents and was very specific. And when I did, I could see all of the files that I have backed up listed there. That's the simplest way to see if your files now are backed up. Now, if there's a specific file that you're looking for in order to make sure that it's backed up, You can also, inside of the Mozi Pro status window, you can click on this Files Backed Up window. It opens this little search screen, and you can do a search for the name. Let's say, and there you go, there's a list of all the files that contain the word troubleshooting in them. So this is a way for you to track down files that have been backed up if you're looking for it. All right. Let's see. We have a question from Laura. Users, if someone presses the forgot password link, it is possible that they won't receive an email on it. Now, the most common reason for them not receiving an email that there has been a forgotten password is because they have, when they installed the client, they didn't use actual email addresses. I don't know if this is actually the case. I'd have to look at your account to see. But the most common reason is people have put something like, Steve at company, but they didn't put the .com, or they put Steve at example.com, or something that they don't really own, as a way to keep from being spammed, or they don't want to use actual email addresses for whatever reason. And so you will see that from time to time, where people won't use actual email addresses. Now, I don't know exactly what else may have caused it, but that would be another. Laura, if you'd like, you could send me your email address, and I will look into that particular issue. I may even get that assigned out to one of our support techs to help you with that, because we certainly want you to get your product working and be happy with Mozi. Let me look for any additional questions there. We do have a request from some people to be included in the email loop. I can't guarantee you will every time. I will add you to the list, but the easiest way, again, is just to keep track of the Facebook and Twitter accounts. We also will be posting them inside the community, the invitations for people to log in or to sign up if they so choose. Okay, we do have one other question. Randy has popped up with a question wondering if there will be a download for the webinar available for after. The answer is yes. We store all of our web seminars in a simple place to find it. It's under our Mozi community blog, and if you come in here, you'll notice that we have them listed here. So Mozi Pro for servers, and you scroll down, and here's our Mozi Pro Administrator webinar. We keep them in this list, so you can come back at any time and re-enjoy them if you so choose. There are, like I said, despite the fact that I think I have a very charming voice, okay, I'm being just a little bit funny here, and it doesn't really come across very well in a webcast, but there is a tutorial section here, and if you're looking for very specific information, sometimes those tutorials are a little more appropriate for addressing very specific questions. As an example, selecting files for backup. You might want more detail about specific items, or using the admin console. There's a whole section on the admin console, and using it to administer your account. Alrighty. Thank you very much for attending today's webcast. I hope you found it at least helpful, possibly enjoyable. And we will be doing this again next month and every month following, and we will try to keep you informed as best we can. Now, there's one other thing I wanted to point out. There will probably be a survey sent your way. We're looking for honest feedback. If there's something you'd like us to do, something you'd like us to change, something you think that went well or otherwise could be improved upon with these web seminars, please go ahead and give us your comments. We would love to be able to get your feedback and implement it. We want to listen to our customers and make them happy. So thank you very much again for attending. Look in your email the next 24 hours for that survey to show up, and we appreciate your time. Thank you, and have a good day.